Hiya! Welcome! This is Minidisc Monday number 62, and we're going to do something a little bit different today because I'm reviewing for the first time really a soundtrack album, and it's also on the whole a classical album. While I did way back in the early days of MD Monday review the best of Bond, James Bond, you can't really call that a soundtrack album because it's just collecting all the Bond themes up to the late 1990s. But this is a full-on motion picture soundtrack. More specifically, it's James Horner's music from the motion picture Titanic. Well, of course, Titanic needs no introduction from me as a film. We concentrated on the music here, and I might have to tackle this review a little bit differently just because I'm way out my comfort zone in reviewing a classical album. But to give you a bit of a backstory, of course, James Horner was the composer, the orchestrator, the music itself was performed largely by the Hollywood Studio Symphony, I believe. And the story behind the Titanic soundtrack was that James Cameron, the director of the film, he originally wanted Enya to contribute to the soundtrack. And I mentioned this in the review of Enya's album Shepherd Moons a couple of months ago. He used, I think, Book of Days as temporary background music during certain scenes on the film while he was, cutting it, editing it, etc. Enya refused to be a part of this. Quite sad really, seeing as I'm a massive Enya fan, but I guess in an alternate universe that would have been very interesting. And he got in the Norwegian soprano Sissel, who did basically kind of wordless vocalizations throughout this album. And of course we'll get onto the love theme from Titanic, My Heart Will Go On, later on. Obviously, I've owned this mini disc many years. I did also used to have this album on CD and the follow-up soundtrack album Back to Titanic, which is also available on MD, and I did look out for it many years ago but couldn't find it at quite the right price I wanted to pay. So before we get into it, of course, let's have a look at the packaging, the contents and what have you. Yeah, the case, there's some nasty cracks there, but it's holding together. Here's the booklet, not as elaborate as you would think for an epic disaster drama movie soundtrack album, but it folds out into a concertina with some nice images from the film. I was a big fan of the film back in the day, but I have to admit I've not seen it in about, I would estimate, around 15 years, perhaps a little longer to be honest, but I have seen it numerous times prior to that. And of course this was the first time that I'd listened to the album itself for quite some years as well. Here's the mini disc. We've got the album artwork on that side, and that's the track listing and a couple of Sony logos there, as this was out on the Sony Classical and Sony Music Soundtracks label, and of course your usual meaningless legal bump type numbers and things. While I don't really think I can analyse many of the tracks on the album as we go through them, I can give you an overall viewpoint of how I feel about this after listening to it again. But I will go through the tracks. There's 15 on here, and track number 1, Never an Absolution, 2 Distant Memories, 3 Southampton, 4 Rose, 5 Leaving Port, 6 Take Her to See Mr. Murdoch, 7 Hard to Starboard, 8 Unable to Stay, Unwilling to Leave, 9 The Sinking, 10 Death of Titanic, 11 A Promise Kept, 12 A Life So Changed, 13 An Ocean of Memories. The penultimate track, 14, is the love theme from Titanic, performed by Celine Dion, of course, My Heart Will Go On. Of course, I can talk about that a little bit more, as it's a pop song, ultimately, though it uses the leitmotif of the Ilian pipes that you hear throughout this album. I think originally Sissel, who provided a lot of the vocalisations throughout this album, she was expected to maybe perform My Heart Will Go On, but I think it was James Horner himself rather than Cameron who chose a more recognisable pop star in Celine Dion to perform that. The album version, it's markedly different from the single version that I'm perhaps a little more used to hearing. There's none of the backing vocals that you hear on the single mix, and the end of it sounds a bit different as well. I think the single mix, as far as I can remember, probably just fades out, but this one is kind of a little bit different to what you might expect, but not overly so. It is still My Heart Will Go On that you've all heard and you all know. Final track on the album is Hymn to the Sea. I really enjoyed listening to this again. It was the biggest selling classical album of all time. It might still be. Certainly Titanic was for many years the biggest film of all time at the box office in many countries. This weighs in lengthwise at around 70 something minutes, so it's not even half the length of the film. No wonder that Back to Titanic, a second follow-up soundtrack album, was able to be released with more music from the film and some other exclusive tracks, I believe. I love Ilian pipes, so that is a really nice leitmotif to hear, to be honest, and you get other certain recurring themes from the orchestra throughout this album that you can kind of hark back to and like, oh yeah, that was previous. And then also, if you're familiar with the film, putting this album on, you can really sort of picture certain scenes and certain moments. A lot of the tracks made for the disaster parts, the sinking, the rescues, etc. Full of drama in the music, full of action, full of heartache, heartbreak, you know, all the emotions that you would expect. James Horner here, who actually died in 2015 in a plane crash, and I only learnt that as I was doing my research for this recently. But he did a brilliant job with this soundtrack album. It doesn't mean I'm a classical fan and I want to get more classical music into the collection. I mean, classical music, I have no problem with it. It has its place. Certainly for me, as a big TV and film buff, using certain either well-known or originally written classical pieces for a show or a movie, I think that's absolutely fine. And I would like to get more soundtrack albums into my collection on vinyl, maybe even CD if there was something that cropped up that I really wanted to hear. This is a nice one to have on Minidisc, and it's a bit of a shame that I don't have the follow-up on MD, as I can't review it if I don't. This brought back a lot of memories of watching the film so many times back in the late 90s into the 2000s. And I probably will watch the film again at some point before too long, as it has been, as I say, at least 15 years since I've seen it. It's a recommendation, certainly if you love the film, you're familiar with the music, and this is just a nice accompaniment, a nice souvenir if you will. It's been reissued on CD and vinyl, I think at least a couple of times in more recent years. So don't worry about looking for a now expensive edition on Minidisc. But that is the excellent, very Celtic tinged Titanic music from the motion picture by James Horner. So there we go, Minidisc Monday wrapped up again today. And before I say my thanks and goodbyes, I want to let you know that in 2 weeks' time we are back, but it's going to be another weekly themed series going through the month of April. I'm not going to tell you what the theme is, but I will give you this clue. We're going to look at 4 albums across the 4 consecutive Mondays, and 2 of the albums are by the same group, and then 2 of the other albums are by members of that group. So there's your starter for 10. Join me in 2 weeks' time and you'll see what that's all about. But thank you all for watching. Special thanks go to my wonderful subscribers and generous patrons. I'm going to go now, and please join me again in 2 weeks' time for the start of another weekly run of 4 episodes of Minidisc Monday. Cheers everyone. See ya!